Hey everybody, it's Josh with the Lead Ministry Podcast. Now, hey, listen, before we jump into the podcast, I want to let you know of some exciting news. I have a brand new course that I'm getting ready to release entitled Lead Conflict. That's right, Lead Conflict. Listen, if you have been in ministry for any length of time, you understand that conflict is a part of our role. We want to teach you how to minimize the frequency and likelihood of conflict taking place, but we also want to help you strategize how to manage the conflict that does come your way. Now, again, as you would expect, this is a full-length course. Tons of downloads, tons of fantastic strategies. Again, the new Lead Conflict course is coming your way, and we're excited to do this little podcast series that kind of teases out some of the concepts that we're going to be releasing through this brand new course, Lead Conflict. All right, gang, let's jump into the podcast. Hey, everybody, welcome back again to the Lead Ministry Podcast. This is something that we love to do. We love to talk about these great principles. This is kind of life lessons and ministry lessons, and we love to have you along for the ride. Part of the reason that we do this, quite honestly, is that we want to help you, the ministry leader. Number one, we want to help you to get organized. If you get organized, you're going to stay ahead of the curve. Number two, we want to help you to stop the revolving door of volunteers. That's going to be a royal pain. But we want to help you prevent burnout. And by the way, one of the ways that you can prevent volunteers from prematurely exiting, whereby you're going to prevent ministry burnout, is by understanding how to manage conflict. So we're doing this little mini series on managing conflict and how to lead conflict. And so we're excited about that. We're excited to have our good friend, Mr. Bill Van Kirk. Good to see you again, man. So grateful to have you. Like we both have said today, we kind of love podcast recording days, don't we, buddy?
I do. And I just learned so much from exploring these topics with you, especially in this conflict series. Man, I think it doesn't matter how long you've been in ministry or been doing life. We all need help with the conflict area of of life. So this has been really good for me personally. Yeah, it is good for me personally. A couple of podcasts ago, I had some pretty deep reflections, and that's a great thing. So I want to let everybody know in podcast land, you know, truly, just like Bill said, we are learning right alongside you, and a great dose of humility from me on this topic. Yes, we have learned a few things, but we're still learning quite a few. I must say that a lot of these principles that we're talking about have come from my very own ministry pains, that I've been beat up and sitting in the corner, you know, licking wounds and putting Band-Aids on. And I'm like, how did I get here? Could I not maybe not get here? How could I not do this? And then really truly with all humility, I'm so honored that I get to throw some of these out to you in podcast land. And, you know, people do get a hold of us and let us know, Bill, that, you know, these are making a difference in our world. So we're very, very, very grateful. Here we are, Lead Ministry Podcast. I think we are at number 7. This is the 7th of a series of 8 as it relates to kind of managing conflict, how to lead conflict. Well, as we're talking about managing conflict, we always seek on the podcast to define it. What is this thing, conflict? We're going to develop it and give you some straight up principles. And then we're going to challenge you to do it and give you some kind of warning, some kind of guidelines. So these are the big 3 buckets. Let's define it quickly. What is this definition of conflict? It is a serious disagreement or argument, typically protracted, meaning that it takes some time to unwind this serious disagreement or argument. It's going to take some leadership moxie. It's going to take some delicate and sometimes dicey communication and having high communication skills. I got to say, we've said it before, we're going to say it again, any fool can create conflict, but it takes an emotional genius to broker peace. I want to be a broker of peace. I want to be a man of peace. That is something that is challenging to me. That's something that I have areas to grow in.
And so we're grateful that everybody's here. We want to encourage you. Number one, we want to teach you and encourage you to find ways to intelligently reduce the likelihood of conflict happening. There are some strategies around that. However, we also want to help you to intelligently manage the conflict that is inevitable to come our way. So it's reducing, but it's also managing. This next principle, so there we have our definition, but now we're going to develop it in our big second bucket, or a big block is going to be that I don't count opinions. I weigh them. You see, in a ministry context, Bill, there are tons of people. You may be at a church of hundreds and hundreds and maybe even 1,000 people, and everybody has their opinion about how it should go to the right or to the left. And sometimes I really need to dial in and listen to those. But sometimes I need to weed some of those out. And not everybody's opinion. I can't lead effectively by taking everyone's opinion and implementing it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you can't please everyone. Yes. And I think this is especially helpful for people who are just getting into ministry or are new.
Yes.
Is because I experienced this firsthand. Is when I got in, I thought, man, there's all these opinions and I lose every time. Because if I go this way and I respond to this opinion, then the people over here are now mad at me.
That's
and
exactly
so like
right.
you can get to a place of feeling very defeated very quickly if you don't put into practice what we're talking about today.
That's right. So we're looking to teach you how to not count opinions, but actually a wiser move is to weigh opinions. Well, again, we're super, super grateful that you guys are here. So let's jump in. So again, we don't count opinions. We are seeking to weigh them. Now, we want to give you some education about how to do that. And so, you see, not everyone's opinion carries the same gravitas. There's a weighted value, Bill. There's a weighted value to some people's opinions. They just carry more weight. And this weighted value to somebody's opinion, well, certain people's character, it causes me to listen more intently. Years ago, I was fortunate enough to lead a rather large ministry, and lo and behold, we made a decision that was truly the best decision. We made this somewhat controversial decision with a lot of circumspection, a lot of intelligence, a lot of wisdom, a lot of input. But it doesn't mean that it's going to make everybody happy. Mm-hmm. And there was one woman, and she was one of many who disagreed with what the decision that we made. But I got to tell you, simply because of her legitimately godly character, I listened far more intently to what she said because her character and her godliness, it gave her an automatic place at the table. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense, yeah.
And so because of her character, I didn't count her opinion. I weighed it and I said, this is a far more weighted opinion. And I listened with great intent with her because of her character. Now watch this. Certain people's commitment to the ministry causes me to listen more intently. Let's take the converse of that. Somebody's got some super strong opinion and they don't participate in any way, shape, or form. Gotta say, I'm not going to listen nearly as much as somebody who has been in the throes of this thing and pulling heavy weight for the last 5 years. Talk to me.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I think this happens a lot in the church. It's happened to me a lot where you have the person who, kind of attends occasionally
Yep.
and is clearly not committed to what you're doing. And they have all these super strong opinions. And I think the reason why behind that is because you have to have skin in the game.
Yes.
It was somebody who has ownership and has skin in the game. It's just true. They have a lot more say in where the ministry is going. because they're on the team. They're committed. They're part of it.
Absolutely.
And so that's just, I mean, I'm not saying you dismiss some of those offhand comments from people who are just attending or, just coming occasionally. You don't dismiss them all out.
No.
But the person who is super committed, who comes week after week, the person who's invested themselves, their lives, their resources, their family into the church, when they share their opinion, it might cause you to pause a little bit more to really question what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's how it should go.
That's exactly right. So somebody who is that committed, I'm going to listen to them more intently. So we got character, we got commitment, well, we also got competence. Now, somebody may not be all that invested in our ministry, but I know them and they are sharp and they're smart and they're super godly, and they may not be participating in my ministry, but from outside, they provide some level of opinion. I might go, I'm gonna listen to this because they're literally that smart and they're literally that intelligent.
Right. It would be like if you're running a certain ministry within your church, and then somebody who has an expertise in organizational leadership comes to you, even if they're not part of your particular ministry, and they say, hey, I actually have some techniques and some ideas that I think you could implement that would actually greatly, help your ministry. Hey, because of their competence, because of their track record, because of their area of expertise, that's an opportunity for you to listen a little bit more.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And so this is providing people who are listening to the podcast with an opportunity to categorize people. Now, you got to be careful. But the thing is that there are so many opinions. And as you said, if you're a younger person in ministry, this could be really, really, really challenging, that you are all of a sudden overwhelmed. And this is going to kind of cut through the noise. I don't count opinions. I actually weigh them. Sorry about that. So not everybody's opinion carries the same gravitas. Some people's character causes me to listen more. Some people's commitment and the amount of weight that they're pulling causes me to listen more. But some people are just smart, and I have respect for their perspective. Well, on the converse, some people are uninformed. They are not a part of the flow of ministry traffic that we have. They're not aware of history. They're not aware of where we're headed. And I'm just simply not willing to listen to them nearly as much. I'm not blowing them off, but I'm certainly not changing every direction based on their whims. Another one. Some people are uninvolved. Again, we talked about the involved people. Well, if you're literally not involved, I'm not listening as much. Here's the deal. Listen to this. I had a couple of people. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but it's a true story. I had a guy, they were brand new to our church, and they said, hey, we'd like to meet with you. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. So we met during the third service, and he laid out a very impassioned approach. Now you got to understand, this is the maybe third week they've been at our church. And he laid out an impassioned proposal for why we needed to dismiss and get rid of our extraordinarily successful Wednesday night program and immediately adopt that which he was suggesting. You need to get rid of it, and here's what you need to replace it with. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, have you ever attended our Wednesday night? Nope, not yet. But I got to tell you, the thing that I'm proposing is outstanding. And I was like, well, you have just lost every bit of credibility with me. Right.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes I've experienced that. People will come from another ministry context often and do that.
Oh,
where they say,
yes.
I was part of this church and we just had this super successful such and such. And so if you did that here, could you imagine the possibilities? And what they're missing is that they don't know what you're doing now. They don't know what you've done in the past. They don't know the heart of your people. They don't know the spiritual condition of your leaders or your kids or anything.
That's right.
And they're just saying, well, because I've seen it here, it must it must work across the board.
That's exactly right. And so I didn't count that guy's opinion as like, I didn't count it really at all. I was kind of like, actually, the forcefulness with which you're bringing this causes me to almost dismiss you straight out.
Right.
And lo and behold, let's ask the question, how long did he stay at our church? Not very long.
And I don't say this out of pride or like because I'm some sort of expert, but I've often just, when people come in and they pretend to know ministry better than you, right, after many years of ministry success, you just don't weigh those people's opinions very heavily.
Nope.
You don't, because they haven't experienced it. They haven't lived it. Now, am I listening? Am I listening within what they're saying for something that's useful and something valuable? Absolutely. We all have blind spots.
For
right?
sure.
And so there might be an aspect to what they're saying, but to weigh it on the same level as somebody who's committed to your ministry, who has competency,
right. Who's been there for the last 20 years and they've watched and observed where you're going and where you've been. This dude had no idea about history. It's like, don't move an ancient boundary stone until you know why it's been set, buddy. You don't have the type of opinion that would have any weighted value whatsoever. So I'll say this, I am less willing to shape the ministry based on certain people's opinions. And this guy, that's the classic quintessential example. That is one of several. This is not my first rodeo. I had several of those things happen.
Now, sir, thank you for your opinion, but no.
Yes, exactly. You see, the ministry principle that I want people to grab onto is I don't count opinions. I weigh them. And the weighted value is based on some criterion that I want people in podcast land to consider adopting, those weighted values. Well, I got to say, this is a funny one. Back in the day when I was a high school chemistry teacher, I did surveys multiple times a year. And I didn't throw out what I had, which were multiple degrees in education, national board certified, whatever, master's degree in effective instruction. I didn't pitch all of my degrees because some kid said on a half sheet of paper, no more homework.
Yeah, and that actually reveals something really important in ministry. And it's that often people's opinions are for what will benefit them. And your job is not just for one person's benefit. Right. Your job is to shape your ministry and run your ministry that is to the betterment of the entire church, right?
Guaranteed.
And so you have to say, like, you have to discern. A kid says, I don't want any more homework. Well, that'd be great for them, right?
That's right.
Or what they think would be good for them.
That's right.
But what's good for the students of my classroom is that they need to have this in order to get the information and the knowledge that they need to have.
That's exactly right. Not to mention, Bill, and I think this is extremely important. I had those surveys. I had kids say, I think that we should have less homework. And I think that you should give us 7 practice problems, not 10. Because I actually got the principle after the 6th one, and the 7th one probably reinforced it. But the rest are almost borderline busy work. Now, as a good leader, I did those surveys not to appease these kids to make them think that I was listening. I actually was in a position that I wanted to do the best thing. And so I actually altered my good practices. And by the way, who were I had their names on those things. I knew kids' handwriting. Are you kidding me? And I was like, she's sharp. This kid is sharp. And I heard it a couple of times. I was like, you know what? Touche. I'm going to lop off problems 8, 9, and 10. So I'm willing to change. But I'm not willing to jettison everything. So I think that's really, really, really important. Okay, so some quick warnings about this. Some quick warnings about weighing opinions. Number 1 warning, big warning. Don't just listen to the pretty people. And we as humans, we are pretty easily persuaded by pretty people. By people who are good looking. They dress nice. I mean, that sounds like this sounds like, oh my word, Josh, who would do that? Everybody that I know, including myself. Right. We're just persuaded by superficial things. And we think that the pretty people ought to be listened to. And by the way, those pretty people often in their minds think that they ought to have a bigger ear because in other areas of their life, they just typically get their way because they're pretty people. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, the popular person or the good kid,
That's
it's like you might be like, well, they're the ones that everyone likes. I don't want to go against what they're thinking.
Big time. And how much more, not just the kid, but now the adult. We can feel pressure by the popular or pretty people. And I need to resist making their opinions way more just because they're the pretty people.
Right.
So we got to be careful. So that's warning number 1. And by the way, I felt pressured by that. I think people out in podcast land have felt pressured. And warning number 2 is this: don't listen just to the rich people. The book of James, chapter 2, really throws this down loud and proud, where it says, you got somebody that comes in that's got fancy clothes and big rings, and then you got this guy with shabby clothes, and you say, hey, you sit down here by my feet, and you sit up here in a position. Have you not made a judgment about these people? The kingdom of God ought not be this way, he says. So be cautious that you're not bowing to the wishes of just the rich people. Very dangerous. I've seen this happen. I have felt the pressure by this. So if I'm willing to out myself, okay? I have felt the pressure by rich and influential people to bow to their ideas. And that's not necessary. I'm not going to give them weighted value just because they happen to be a big giver at the church. That's not the only reason that I'm looking at. Warning number 3, don't just listen to connected people. So by connected people, they're a mover and a shaker. And all of a sudden you want to be in the good graces of the people that pull the strings and pull the levers. Caution, caution, caution. Do I think that a connected person may have a stronger weighted opinion? Possibly. Are they involved? Well, if they're connected, they're probably involved. Are they godly? Connection doesn't necessarily equate to godliness. Are they competent? Being a connected person does not necessarily equate with super, super robust ministry intelligence. So I'm not going to fall into the trap of bowing to the pretty people, of bowing to the rich people, and bowing to the connected people. I want to let you know, again, I've said this already, I am outing myself that I have felt those pressures. And that is a good case of the normals, but I want to weigh other values rather than those superficial values.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think anyone in ministry leadership has experienced those pulls, right? Those pulls from the it people to want to shape your ministry towards them. And I think it's so valuable to not rely on those, but to those other metrics that you've talked about.
That's right.
And how to weigh people's opinions.
That's right. And I got to tell you, it's a tough balance. And I have to throw this out there, Bill. It can be very, very, very challenging. It can be very challenging to know how to maneuver, because sometimes those connected people, sometimes you have to do a little horse trading. And I get it. I get it. But be cautious. What we're talking about is learning the discerning value of weighing opinions, not simply counting them. I think that we've discussed the ministry values that we should place more weighted value on. It's character, it's their competence, and it's also their level of commitment to the ministry. Well, gang, super grateful that you guys have been here. This has been another fun podcast episode. And by the way, I think this is a supreme way to avoid unnecessary conflict. So don't just take everybody's opinion and start running down some road. You're going to lose every time. If you want to know, one surefire way to lose is to try to please everybody. Well, gang, we're grateful for you, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in to today's podcast. I hope that it was valuable to you. Before you close this out, I want to remind you that we have a brand new course entitled Lead Conflict. That's right. As you know, conflict is a good case of the inevitabilities, and we want to help you to successfully navigate and manage conflict in your ministry role. So be on the lookout for this brand new course that is going to be dropping soon, Lead Conflict. And thank you once again for tuning into the podcast.